The Tears of God. A novel by Dr. A. Ahmed. This book continues the story of the Arab sugar daddy and the beautiful Indian girl, and the story of the Indian child bride and the old Arab husband, and the story of the Indian Miss World and the rage of Muslims of the world, and also the story of Christina and the complete Jew. They have been written in English and translated into Arabic by the author Dr. Ahmed. This tale resonates with genuine love, strong resilience, and steadfast courage. I invite you to accompany me as I narrate the adventures of the extremely beautiful Indian girl, Aphrodite Khan, and her handsome American lover, Michael Lewinsky, in the Muslim world. Before we dive in the tapestry of the story, I would like to remind the reader this novel is narrated in 6 books. Book 1, The Arab Sugar Daddy and the Beautiful Indian Girl. Book 2, The Indian Child Bride and the Old Arab Husband. Book 3, The Indian Miss World and the Rage of Muslims of the World. Book 4, Christina and the Complete Jew. Book 5, The Tears of God, Jews, Blacks, and Muslim Women. And Book 6, The Hidden Life of the Prophet Muhammad. This is an intriguing epic story which exhibits resilience, love, and sacrifice. Book 5. Researching the social life of the Muslim woman in the Islamic world. Copyrights. All rights are reserved. No part of this book may be reproduced, stored in a retrieval system, or transmitted in any form or by any means without the prior written permission of the author, except by a reviewer, who may quote brief passages from a review for printing in a public newspaper, general magazine, school journal, or university article. All characters in this novel are fictional, and any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, is merely coincidental. Chapter 25. On the first wedding night of the virgin bride in a Muslim society. Not many days passed when another Sudanese family, living close by them, invited Sakina, Sulwa, and Samira to a wedding celebration feast. By then the Indian wife of the American husband is considered part of the widow's family and thus warranted an invitation. Her Eritrean female helpers, Mona and Zahara, are automatically invited too. It is a custom all over Sudan that women are invited by women and men by their male counterparts. In the event of a wedding, circumcision of small boys, female genital mutilation of little girls, and the Alzar rites, 2 or 3 young girls will be sent by the family concerned to extend invitations to all the women in the area. Likewise, 2 young boys will distribute invitation cards to the men. Each woman will be invited verbally, while every man must receive a beautiful invitation card. When the 2 girls, known as the female inviters, arrived to invite the 5 women, they did not mention the name of the American guy Samir Ahmed. Therefore, on the wedding evening, only the 5 invited girlfriends, Sakina, Sulwa, Samira, Mona, and Zahara, attended the happy occasion. After attending the happy wedding celebration, the Indian girl Samira Ahmed reported to her life partner that she had genuinely enjoyed the wonderful marriage party. She said she likes the handsome groom and his lovely bride. She did not notice anything unusual about the newly wedded couple, which might remotely suggest spousal abuse. Sulwa announced that the bride was 16 years old, and her groom was 25. The groom is her cousin, and his bride is his cousin. In Islam, it is entirely normal and lawful for male and female cousins to wed. This is because the Prophet Muhammad had married his cousin Zainab bint Jahash. It is, of course, the first Sudanese wedding. Samira has the privilege to attend it. Before attending that wedding, she heard stories of underage girls being married to men as old as their fathers or grandfathers. She is a victim of child marriage. When she was a child of 7-year-old, a 70-year-old Saudi married her, imprisoned her in his mansions in Eritrea and Iran, and raped her for 10 long years. This Sudanese wedding, however, seemed to run counter to her long-standing belief that many Muslim underage girls were given in marriages to men much older than them. Inwardly, she hopes that she can see more weddings of the sort in Muslim societies. Unfortunately, that wonderful experience shattered on the very first wedding night for the newly married couple. The first night is referred to as the night of entering the virgin bride. Essentially, it is the night the marriage is consummated. The groom will not be allowed to take his bride out of her father's house until he has sex with her and confirms that she is a virgin, and that he was the first man to break her hymen or rob her virginity. That alone is not enough. The bride also should prove to her family, in-laws, relatives, girlfriends, and all neighbors that she is unquestionably a virgin, and that she was deflowered against her wish by her groom. So how does the groom furnish proof that his bride's virginity has been robbed by him alone to the crowd outside the bedroom? In some backward Arab tribes that matter can be solved by a white handkerchief the groom uses to prove the virginity of his bride. He will wrap the hanky around his finger and insert it in the bride's vagina and break her hymen. Then he must come out and show the blood-smeared handkerchief to all people. And through that stupid custom, he can prove to that entire outside gathering of relatives, neighbors, and friends he is the first one to insert his finger inside his bride's pussy and broke her seal. However, that silly practice is not acceptable to the relatively cultured Sudanese people. We will now visit the process of confirmation of the bride's virginity for the people of Sudan. It so happened on that first wedding night for the newly married couple, Samira is in deep sleep, when she was suddenly jarred awake due to the screaming of a girl at about 1:30 in the early morning. At that time, in the still hours of the new morning, the shouting continued like a fire alarm on and on. It drove the sleep away from Samir and Samira, and filled their hearts with great dread and panic. At first, Samira thought that the screaming was coming from the house of the three rival wives of the dangerous butcher. But Samir corrected her and pointed out that it was coming from the house of the newly wedded couple. It is also the adjoining house in the opposite direction. Samir's first reaction is to call 911 and report the rape or murder attempt crime to the police. Remembering that he is in Sudan, and that there is not a 911 number to call, nor is there a phone with him, he prodded Samira to hurry to Salwa and Sakina's hut and find out what is going on. Samira ran first to the hut of her Eritrean female interpreter and asked her to come quickly with her. Like two persons being chased by an invisible force, the two foreign girls rushed towards the women's section. It is a moonless pitch-dark night. They cannot see in front of them. Samira relied on her memory to find her way. Like fired to bullets, the extremely frightened girls forced their way into the biting cold breeze of the night and entered the women's section. Samira has not bothered to knock on the door or waited for someone to let her in. She just pushed open the small door of the hut, followed by her female interpreter. The hut is pitch dark without light, and the two widowed women are sleeping and snoring like the sleepers of the cave. Like a cat trying to find her way in a dark kitchen, Samira groped her way inside the dark hut. The first person she came upon was Sakina. When the old woman has sufficiently awakened, Samira told her that a girl is shouting for help because someone wants to kill her or rape her. Sakina responded calmly by first lighting her local lamp. Then she looked at Samira and examined her face carefully to find out whether she is awake, hallucinating, walking in her sleep, or reeling from a bad nightmare. After that, she listened for a few minutes to the screaming of the girl in question. The old woman smiled before she opened her mouth to talk. She told Samira, "It is the lovely bride whose wedding they had attended. She is screaming because her handsome man is trying to do it to her, and she is not supposed to allow him to do it to her." Then Sakina laughed and said, "He is going to do it to her anyhow. Just go back to your husband, my daughter, and put a pillow on your ears and sleep." Samira returned to her American husband and related what the old woman had told her. Neither of them could understand why the bride must resist the sexual advances of her lawful husband, or why he must take her by force. Both remained awake, in part guaranteed by the continued shouting of the bride, which continued for at least an hour and a half. Early, the following morning, Samira woke Salwa and asked her whether she had heard the screaming of the bride last night. Sulwa said she had heard it, but she put a pillow over her ears and resumed her sleep. Then she repeated the same words Sakina said last night. Samira insisted that Sulwa must explain to her in more detail that strange marriage custom that seemed to be okay for everyone except her American husband and her. Sulwa began by saying shyly that she had screamed and fought against her late husband on their first wedding night, and did not allow him to do it to her until he did it by force. According to her, it is a required custom that every new bride must resist and fight against her groom over her virginity, and strive hard not to allow him to have sex with her until he will do it by force, legal rape. The custom required that the groom must try through all means available to him to force his bride to yield to his sexual desire. This results in the first wedding night being a tooth and nail deadly fight and struggle between the groom and the bride. Generally at midnight, the bride will be led by a few young teenage girls to a hut or room where her groom will be eagerly waiting for her. Then the girls must lock the room up from without and leave. As soon as the groom is sure that the door is securely locked up and all windows are shut, he must attack his bride. The bride must start running around in circles inside the hut and screaming as loudly as she can muster by her mouth. The groom knows that no one will respond to her calls for help. He then begins chasing her around the hut, as the cock chases its hen or the dog its bitch. She jumps on the bed, he jumps after her. She jumps off the bed and he follows her. She may stumble over a chair or a table and fall, but she will get up quickly and resume her running and screaming, for it is what is expected of her. When the groom succeeds in catching his bride, then the real fight begins. It will not be a small fight, but a real one in which each of them must apply full strength. The bride fights by hands, legs, and teeth. She scratches with her nails, kicks with her feet, hits with her fists, and bites with her sharp teeth the body of her groom. The groom's job will be much harder than his bride's fight. In addition to his self-defense, he is supposed to undress his bride. He must tear her clothes off her body piece after piece. Though he may succeed in stripping her fully naked, he still may face the difficulty of forcing her to yield to his sexual desire. Meanwhile, the bride continues to scream and fight and defend her virginity until the last soldier she has is killed over. It is conceivable that the groom may be able to force his bride to give up her struggles and yield to his physical superiority. But he still has one more hurdle. To understand this last difficulty, we need to recollect our earlier foray into female genital mutilation. As we already mentioned, post-circumcision, the circumcised girl's vagina would be so sealed and narrowed until it is reduced to a small opening that allows the girl only to urinate. The hole would be a little bigger than an eye of a needle. Intercourse is simply impossible. Her pussy's small opening cannot allow a man's phallus to pass through and penetrate her private parts. It is just like locking up the girl's vagina, or putting a secure lock on her private parts. As we mentioned earlier, the pre-Islamic Arabs used to fashion underwear made from iron and place them around the private parts of their women. The iron underwear was called Hizm al-Ifa, which means the belt of honor. When their women were taken captives, the captors might not be able to rape them. The same primitive idea was passed on to Muslims and practiced today more evilly through female genital mutilation. Instead of putting the iron underwear and locking it up, in Islam, the padlock is placed on the girl's vagina through female genital mutilation. Moreover, in Islam, by removing the girl's clitoris, labia majora, and labia minora, her sexual organ would be destroyed and mutilated to the point that she loses all desire for sex. Some Muslims argue that those private parts, which the midwife excised during the female circumcision, will grow again. This is not true. The clitoris, the labia majora, and the labia minora will never grow again. Therefore, the circumcised girl loses her sexually sensitive private parts and has no desire for sex. She has what they call a dead pussy. Sex for her is worse than rape. Accordingly, on her first wedding night, the bride will experience terrible pain and feels as if she has been raped by her groom. In many cases, grooms could not be able to penetrate their brides' small pussies until their brides were taken to the hospitals. The small hole that is left open cannot allow the groom even to insert one of his hand's fingers. An erected man's phallus will be too big to go through such a small opening. Those hospitalized brides must undergo surgeries to widen their private parts, so that their grooms can have normal sex with them. Sometimes, the fear of being labeled as impotent or gay drives the groom to attempt everything to effect penetration. There were cases when the grooms used knives to widen their brides' vaginas. Moreover, a groom may not like his bride's pussy to be widened through surgery. He believes when his bride undergoes such surgery her vagina will become too big and hence, he cannot enjoy having sex with her. Before we dismantle the morals behind this strange custom, we must explore its consequences. In so many cases, the wedding nights of the honeymoons ended up with admission to the hospital with serious injuries, not only to the brides but also to their grooms. Sometimes, the bride might be healthy and stronger than her groom. Cases of brides having broken hands or legs of their husbands are not rare occurrences. In some rare cases, the grooms were the ones screaming for help before their brides could murder them. If there are no morals behind such bizarre custom, then we can conclude that it had been taken from beasts. Firstly, the bride's resistance is supposed to prove to all sundry that she was born and raised so strictly and correctly that even her groom must not be allowed to violate her. In other words, there is no acceptable way to have sex with her except by utmost force. Secondly, by screaming, she must prove to her family, in-laws, relatives, girlfriends, female schoolmates, and neighbors that she is a morally good girl, and that she abhors sex. Thirdly, she must prove to her husband and all present that she is indeed a virgin. This last claim can be verified by her mother-in-law, and her mother by examining the bloodstain on the bedsheet the following morning. The bloodstain will be clear proof that she was a virgin, and her hymen had been broken only by her groom. Fourth, through her yelling and wailing, she must announce how painful sex is for her because she is circumcised, her vagina sealed together, her female pussy securely zipped, eternally zapped, and securely closed up, and a perfect virgin. Fifth, she will not agree or allow herself to practice sex with any man including her lawful groom. Her husband can penetrate her securely closed-up pussy only by her halal raping her in her parents' house. For that reason, the American couple heard the lovely bride screaming throughout the night, until they saw the first rays of the sun of the new day appearing on the far horizon. Chapter 26. A marriage proposal of a 10-year-old Muslim girl. That midnight episode served to erode whatever respect the American couple has for Sudanese Muslims, men as well as women. They could not fathom how rational and moral human beings whom God created in His image and endowed with His intellect, His soul, and His conscience could be so ignorant in their thinking and allow such an evil practice of raping the bride by her groom under the guise of good custom. This so-called halal and legally accepted rape is worse than the evil practice of female genital mutilation. Samir and Samira simply consider it an unjustifiable act and criminal rape. Even ancient primitive tribes such as the barbarians of Europe, the animists of Africa, the so-called savages tribes of the Americas, and the aboriginals of Australia did not stoop to that level. Many primitives had very advanced societies. Both American lovers know that there is simply nothing they can do to stop or change these evil practices against children and brides. Their only recourse is to expose those hideous crimes they witnessed upon their return to their enlightened and free homeland, the USA. The following day, the old woman Sakina announced that the bride was taken to the hospital late at night due to excessive bleeding from her private parts. Her daughter-in-law Salwa added that the bleeding was the result of her groom's attempts with a pair of scissors to widen her narrowed vagina. His excuse, he said to her parents, he could not be able to penetrate her small pussy. Samir, hearing about it later, simply concluded that they are either mentally retarded people due to the culture of shame imposed on them through the misogynistic teachings of Islam, or that they are a sick society that needs outside assistance. He believes the changes cannot come from within, but must be imposed on them from without by non-Muslim Westerners. He is convinced that anyone in America or anywhere else, after learning about these abuses, still says that Muslim women are not oppressed, and holds such a false opinion, that he is also participating in those crimes. That perpetrator, whoever is he or she, is either abusive to women, or mentally challenged too, who needs to be locked in a mental hospital. While the American couple still could not comprehend the rationale behind the bizarre custom of the first wedding night, yet more disturbing news is about to bleed their collective consciences even further. They came to know that one of the 3 rival wives had informed Sakina and Salwa that her 10-year-old daughter had been betrothed to marry a 63-year-old man. Samira, as expected, has strongly protested, but is brushed aside by Salwa, who laughingly tells her that the underage girl is big enough to get married because she had already had her first period of monthly menses, as all grown women have. She then added, while still laughing, that the 10-year-old small girl could carry it. Samira asked her to explain to her what she meant by the small girl who could carry it. Salwa said because the small girl began to menstruate, that means her vagina can allow the man's penis to come in. Samira does not like the response, adding that the age of marriage should not be decided by the physical development of the girl, but rather her mental and emotional maturity. Salwa flatly brushed aside her statement with a rebuttal that she was a mere 13-year-old girl when got married to her late husband Khalid. Moreover, she informed her that the Sudanese law permits the father to give his 10-year-old daughter in marriage to any man he wants. Samira ignored Salwa and began to talk to Sakina, in the hope of convincing her to speak on her behalf to the mother of the little girl. She is livid because she still harbored scars from her bitter experience as a child bride who got married when she was 7-year-old and remained in that abusive kidnap and rape for 10 years. She kept her past life to herself and concentrated on finding a solution for the innocent underage child. Sakina echoed Salwa's response and explained the typical justification that Muslims always use to justify pedophilia. Our gracious Prophet Muhammad, may the prayers and peace of Allah be upon him, said Sakina, he married our mother Aisha, peace be upon her, when she was the age of 6 and had slept with her when she reached 9 years. Before we proceed further with this important matter, let us explore Sakina's statement regarding Aisha bint Abu Bakr, the child bride, and wife number 3 of the Prophet Muhammad. The most authentic hadiths are confirmed. The Prophet, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, married Aisha when she was 6 years old and consummated the marriage when she was 9. Sahih al-Bukhari, hadith number 4840. On the authority of Aisha, who said, I used to play with dolls in the presence of the Prophet. And I had girlfriends, playmates, who played along with me. They would hide, feeling shy, from him whenever he entered. But he would send for them to join me, and they would play with me. Sahih al-Bukhari, Volume 8, Book 73, Hadith number 151. Explaining this hadith, the renowned hadith explainer Fateh al-Bari said that playing with dolls and similar images is forbidden, but it was allowed for Aisha at that time, as she was a little girl, not yet reached the age of puberty. Fateh al-Bari, Volume 13, page number 143. Aisha also said, my mother came to me while I was being swung on a swing between 2 branches and got me down. My maidservant took over and wiped my face with some water and started leading me. When I was at the door, she stopped so I could catch my breath. I was brought in while Muhammad was sitting on a bed in our house. My mother made me sit on his lap. The other men and women got up and left. The Prophet consummated his marriage with me in my house when I was 9 years old. Neither a camel nor a sheep was slaughtered on behalf of me. Al-Tabari Book 9, page number 131. Narrated Aisha, the Prophet engaged me when I was a girl of 6 years. We went to Medina and stayed at the home of Bani al-Harith bin Khazraj. Then I got ill, and my hair fell. Later on, my hair grew again and my mother, Ruman, came to me while I was playing in a swing with some of my girlfriends. She called me, and I went to her, not knowing what she wanted to do to me. She caught me by the hand and made me stand at the door of the house. I was breathless then, and when my breathing became all right, she took some water and rubbed my face and head with it. Then she took me into the house. There in the house, I saw some Ansari women who said, "Best wishes and Allah's blessing and good luck." Then she entrusted me to them, and they prepared me for the marriage. Unexpectedly Allah's apostle came to me in the forenoon, and my mother handed me over to him, and at that time I was a girl of 9 years of age. Sahih al-Bukhari, Volume 58, Hadith number 234. Narrated Hisham's father, Khadija died 3 years before the Prophet departed to Medina. He stayed there for 2 years or so, and then he married Aisha, when she was a girl of 6 years of age, and he consummated that marriage when she was 9. Sahih al-Bukhari, Book 63, Hadith number 122. On the authority of Aisha, that she said, "The Messenger of Allah returned from the Battle of Tabuk or Khaybar." The narrator of the hadith was in doubt about whether he was told Tabuk or Khaybar. There was a curtain covering her sawa, chamber or a small room in front of the house. The wind blew aside of the curtain and uncovered Aisha's dolls. He said, "What is this, O Aisha?" She said, "My dolls." Then he saw amongst them a horse with 2 wings from scraps of cloth. He said, "What is this which I see amongst them, amongst the dolls?" She said, "A horse." He asked, "What is upon it?" She said, 2 wings. He asked, in astonishment, "A horse with 2 wings?" She said, "Didn't you hear that Suleiman had horses with wings?" She said, "Then he laughed until I saw his molar teeth." Sunan Abu Dawood and Nasa'i al-Sunan al-Kubra, Albani says the chain of narrators of the Nasa'i is authentic. As for the chain of narrators of Abu Dawood, Albani has also declared it to be authentic. These narrations show that the Prophet Muhammad married Aisha when she was a mere child of 9. Accordingly, no Muslim scholar or leader can deny this. Based on the example of the Prophet Muhammad with his child bride Aisha, the minimum age for marriage in the Sharia is not fixed to a specific age. It is left for the girl's wali, her father or guardian. He is authorized by the Sharia to decide which age he wishes to give his daughter in marriage to any man he likes. Moreover, he is not obliged to marry her to a person of her choice. He is the one who has the right to marry her to any man no matter what his age is, with or without her consent. A girl does not sign her marriage contract. Her father or guardian and the groom do. In Surah Al-Talaq 65, verse 4, the Quran allows the father to give his daughter in marriage before she reaches the age of puberty. These hadiths and narrations reveal that the Prophet Muhammad married Aisha when she was 6 and had sexual intercourse with her while she was prepubescent at the age of 9 lunar years. Aisha continued to have an issue of continuous bleeding of blood in her private parts for many years. Muhammad had destroyed her tiny vagina when he raped her at the age of 9. For that reason, Aisha always hated the Prophet Muhammad, and whenever she got a chance, she exposed his evils. She mentioned in her narration about him that Muhammad used to defile the holy month of Ramadan, the sacred month of fasting for Muslims, by kissing her on her lips and sucking her tongue while he was fasting during the day. She also reported him as approaching her during her menses, which is not allowed in Islam. She also described him as lying his head on her lap while she was menstruating, and he read the Quran. He used to allow her to sleep in front of him on his prayer mat, and he performed his prayers. When he wanted to prostrate, he used to pinch her thigh so she could vacate the space for him to touch the mat with his forehead. All those acts of the alleged prophet of God Muhammad are considered gross religious transgressions in Islam. Aisha doubted Muhammad's claim of being the true prophet or messenger of God and accused him of murdering men and taking their daughters and wives for sex. The Prophet Muhammad married Malika bint Ka'b, who was known for her resplendent, magnificent beauty. Aisha entered her and said, "Are you not ashamed of marrying the killer of your father?" So Malika took refuge with Allah from the Prophet, and he hence divorced her. Tabaqat ibn Sa'd, Book 8, page 141, Asad al-Ghaba, Volume 5, page 525. Aisha also noticed that whenever Muhammad wanted to sleep with a woman, he would conveniently claim that Allah had just revealed a verse in the Quran to support his action. In that regard, Aisha sarcastically remarked, "It seems to me that your Lord hastens to satisfy your whims." Sahih Muslim, Volume 2, pages 748 to 749. Aisha said those words when she heard that the Prophet Muhammad was caught by his wife Hafsa in the very act of committing adultery with his maidservant Maria the Copt. She was an Egyptian Christian, and was neither his wife nor his slave girl. Accordingly, what the old woman Sakina has said about the Prophet Muhammad and his marriage to an underage girl of 9 is true and supported by his most authentic hadiths. Chapter 27. The woman Ajuba who destroyed the kingdom of Soba. Nevertheless, Samira just could not leave it at that, despite the religious and social justifications of the two widows Sakina and Salwa in support of child marriage. She went to talk directly to the mother of the girl. The mother is wife number 1. She simply explained to Samira that she had no hand in that decision. It is her husband who decided to give his small underage daughter in marriage to the old man. Samira thought of approaching the father instead, but she was warned by her Sudanese girlfriend. She told her the father was a stubborn and dangerous man. He does not want anyone to tell him what to do with his wives and children, especially the women. He will never take orders from a woman no matter who is she. Salwa explained that there is a long and overly complicated story behind the marriage proposal. She is hesitant to reveal the secret, but her Indian girlfriend begs her to narrate it to her. Salwa reluctantly acquiesced and began to reveal the secret information. According to her, the whole problem started with the third wife, who was placed under the effect of black magic, and then got liberated from it through the Alzar ritual dance. Before we follow the narration of Salwa, let us mention the names of those 3 rival wives, and the betrothed underage daughter. The primary wife is called Khadija, and her 10-year-old daughter is known as Shatsa. The third wife, the former demon-possessed wife, is called Nadia, and the second wife is Hafsa. Their polygamous husband, the butcher, is called Hajj Osman Baraka. Every Muslim man who completed the obligatory Hajj rituals is entitled to have the prefix of Hajj and so to his name. Likewise, every woman visiting Mecca and Medina in Saudi Arabia for the same rituals is given the honorific Hajja. There are yet another 20-odd children in that large family of Hajj Baraka, but we do not need to know their names. Salwa related to her friend Samira that the former possessed wife Nadia is not innocent as she thought. She is like Ajuba who destroyed the kingdom of Soba. Samira said she is very much interested to know first about the story of that ancient Sudanese woman Ajuba, and how she destroyed the kingdom of Soba. She had heard the phrase mentioned 100 times since she came to Sudan. So Salwa is requested to tell the story of the evil woman Ajuba before indulging herself in the secret behind the marriage betrothal of the small girl. Ajuba is a legendary woman who used the beauty of her 3 daughters to tempt men. Her husband was an ear. The man who is completely dominated by his wife is called an ear husband. So Ajuba was like the Phoenician queen Jezebel who married, dominated, and ruled her Jewish husband, King Ahab. Ajuba's daughters were the most beautiful girls in the kingdom of Soba. Soba today is a city in ruins like the city of Tadmur, Palmyra, in the deserts of Syria. According to Islamic mythology, Tadmur was built by the jinn, devils, wild beasts, and giants of King Solomon's army. In Islam, King Solomon used to have an army of demons, wild beasts, giants, and all kinds of birds. In the Quran, King Solomon spoke with an ant and Hudhud or Hupu, Surah Al-Nahl 27, verses 18 and 20-24. People smoking weed, dope, and taking heavy drugs cannot come up with fairy tales than that told by the author of the Quran, Allah, the alleged prophet of God Muhammad. Whether the city was built by Solomon or not is not the issue. Tadmur today is also left in ruins in an oasis in the desert of Syria. Tadmur is the Arabic term for Palmyra, and is also the name of one of the world's most notorious prisons. It is also famous for its Roman-era colonnades, temples, and artifacts. In May 2015, the Islamic State of Iraq and Levant, also universally called ISIS, captured the entire city of Palmyra, after rendering crushing defeat to the Syrian army. First, ISIS fighters focused their destructive efforts on Tadmur prison. After destroying the infamous prison and freeing all its inmates, the militants began to dismantle and destroy Palmyra's magnificent 2,000-year-old colonnaded streets, temple, theater, and artifacts. On May 25, 2015, in the public square, ISIS executed 600 Syrian soldiers and government supporters by a shot to the head or beheading. They also beheaded the 19-year-old daughter of a Syrian army general. Ajuba was a cunning woman who used her beautiful daughters to accumulate riches. She was keenly aware of the marvelous beauties of her daughters and the attraction it held for every man in the city. So, she used to go to the hub and cream of the city and the wealthy people of the society and offer them her willingness to give daughters in marriage to the one who would pay the highest dowry. She would make a deal with one rich man and take half of the dowry in advance and tell him to come on such and such a date to pick up and marry the daughter of his choice. Then she would go to another wealthy man and make a similar deal with him. Using the same modus operandi, the cunning woman Ajuba made 15 deals and collected half of the dowries in advance. Of course, she could not give her 3 daughters in marriage to 15 men. If she could have done that, but polyandry is unlawful in Islam. Only polygamy and adultery with female captives of war or female slaves are allowed in the Quran, Surah Al-Nisa 4, verse 3. After that, Ajuba returned to the first man and told him in tears that her stupid husband had made promises with 3 rich men, and all 3 were coming in such and such a day to marry her 3 daughters. After she said that, she pretended to be angered and disturbed by the sad news, and needed him to rescue at least one of her daughters and marry her. Naturally, the man would want to know how he could prevent the rich and influential suitors from Soba city. Ajuba would respond to that inquiry by passing her finger across her neck, indicating that he had to kill one of them. She would even go as far as to explain how to kill the suitor without being implicated. She would hint that she was acquainted with a few hired killers who would conveniently do the dirty deed on his behalf, but he would have to pay them. The wicked woman went to all the 15 men and told them the same story, and would collect the assassination fees from them. When the hired killers began to slay the rich men, the murders resulted in deadly tribal feuds. Every time an influential tribal chieftain got killed, his tribe would accuse members of another tribe and attack them. This resulted in civil wars in the small kingdom of Soba. While that civil unrest was going on, the cunning woman Ajuba traveled to another kingdom and offered one of her beautiful daughters to the king of that place. She told the king that the king of Soba wanted to take one of her daughters by force, and she needed him to save her from that tyrant king. Then she promised the king to give him one of her daughters if he saved her from the king of Soba, and if he granted her such and such a dowry. The greedy woman, Ajuba, would not be satisfied by the huge amount of wealth she had accumulated. She would return to the king of Soba and tell him that such and such king was planning to attack him because he wanted to take by force one of her daughters. Likewise, she would strike a deal of marriage with the king of her city. In that way, the cunning lady Ajuba was the catalyst and key agent responsible for the destruction of the kingdom of Soba and the deaths of thousands of men. The people of Soba, somehow, found out that Ajuba was the cause of all the wars and destructions. First, they captured her 3 lovely daughters, immersed them in a deep well, and stoned them to death, until they filled the well to the brim with stones. As for their evil mother Ajuba, they tied her legs up between two camels and split her body in half. They came to know of this inhumane punishment in the Islamic tradition while learning the biography of their prophet Muhammad. An old Arab woman, called Ghurfa, was killed for being critical of the alleged prophet of Allah. The prophet instructed her legs to be tied to two camels, and her body torn in half. Ghurfa was an Arab female chieftain. She was over 100 years old when she was sentenced to a violent and gruesome death. In keeping with tradition, the furious and extremely incensed men of the kingdom of Soba killed the cunning woman Ajuba in the same manner. The story of Ajuba is not a true story. She is a fictional character just like Rip Van Winkle or Ahasuerus. She was created by men to attribute any evil that happens in a place or to men to a cunning woman behind it. The story of Ajuba has many versions. One version depicted her as more than just a cunning female cheater and thief, but an extremely immoral woman. Legend said she was as beautiful as the queen of Babel Semiramis. Semiramis was a harlot and a brothel keeper, who had hundreds of beautiful prostitutes in her brothel and tavern houses. According to the Mesopotamian tradition, the tyrant king Nimrod saw Semiramis and fell in love with her and married her. Thus, from a prostitute, the beautiful woman Semiramis was exalted to the position of the queen of Babel. Therefore, the cunning woman Ajuba wanted to get married to a king and become one day a great queen, just like the ancient queen Semiramis. So, she went around the city of Soba deceiving men by promising to give them her beautiful daughters in marriage. She not only demanded money in return for her beautiful daughters, but asked her victims to have sex with her too, and pay her for her sexual services. This version did not only show how the woman Ajuba was punished, but relates to how her pussy also received severe punishment. After she had been tied hands and feet to 4 camels and her body split, her vagina fell into the river Nile and remained alive until today. Her pussy keeps on jumping, dancing, and bouncing up and down in the water like a yo-yo and a dolphin. Many men and women have claimed to have seen it and heard it talking to itself saying, "I am the one who has brought punishment to myself." Another version named her al-Mur al-Saba, the mother of 7 evils. Many bad stories were invented to show why and how the evil woman had been given that bad name. Islamic traditions are full of stories created to show the woman as the evilest creature created by God. She is considered akin to the devil or the woman who married herself to Satan. Perhaps the most accurate accounts of how Muslim women are regarded in Islamic heritage can be found in the writings of the Egyptian Muslim thinker, Sayyid Mahmud al-Kimni. In his book, Rab al-Zaman, The Lord of This Time, under an article entitled Women in Religious Heritage and Legends, which he delivered as a lecture to the People's Progressive Women's Union. Al-Kimni held the Islamic heritage responsible for degrading Muslim woman, Al-Kimni 1996, page number 219. According to him, the religious heritage made the woman believe she has been created from a bent rib, deficient in religion and intellect, her testimony equals half of a man's witness in court, her inheritance is half of a man's, she cannot divorce her husband, Al-Kimni 1996, page number 220. The Muslim woman believes herself to be a Satan, and therefore she cannot control her sexual desires, Al-Kimni 1996, page number 221. According to the Islamic heritage, woman succumbs to her lust and not intellect. She has a natural tendency to cheat on her husband, because she is one of the 4 that cannot be trusted: money, sultan, time, and woman even if you lived with her for a long time, Al-Kimni 1996, page number 220. The woman is created for the comfort and enjoyment of her husband. In that way, the religious heritage made the Muslim woman to believe herself to be a mere vagina, and hence she became horma, taboo, and haram, forbidden, Al-Kimni 1996, page number 221. Therefore, if she kept her faith and her pussy, and gives enjoyment to her husband who is her master, she can enter heaven, Al-Kimni 1996, page number 220. A woman's faith cannot be perfected except by her complete obedience and submission to her husband, and such obedience can secure to her a place in heaven as a prostitute among the many harems of the men. He means the 72 Virgins of Paradise, Al-Kimni 1996, page number 221. The accounts of Al-Kimni give an insight into the theory of women in Islam. It is evident that women are understood as causing constant threats to the social order and religion, and as such, they need to be brought under control. Quoting the words of Darlene M. Jushka, if women are understood to carry the darker elements of culture, the chaotic, the sexual, the irrational, then the suppression of these perceived threats is necessary. Jushka 2001, page number 161. Chapter 28. The Muhalal. The legalizer of the pussy of the thrice-divorced Muslim wife. Now we must go back to the case of wife number 3, and find out why Salwa likened her to the cunning Muslim woman Ajuba, who destroyed the kingdom of Soba. Before she was given in marriage to her present polygamist husband, Nadia was an extremely beautiful girl. She was openly having a love affair with her handsome neighbor Sami. But love in Muslim societies is a crime, and so Nadia's romantic attraction resulted in many adverse consequences to her family. When society discovers a girl in love, then she is no longer accepted as a marriageable bride by any man. No family will consider her as a suitable wife for their son. The virginity of the girl in love will be in great doubt. Moreover, love is widely considered to be an incurable disease. Once the girl's heart is infected with that plague, no power in the entire world can deliver her from it. A girl in love is likened to spoiled fruit. Understandably, her family will try to get rid of her as soon as possible. If they do not slay her in an honor killing, they will have to sell her in marriage to anyone, no matter how old he is, how poor is, how ugly he may be, how low his social status or his tribe, and what ethnic group to which he is belonging. Nadia was 15 years old when she was found to have been infected with the Ebola virus of love. Her parents decided to spare her life and offer her in free marriage to salvage the family's reputation. Only 2 men came forward and asked for her hand in marriage. Both men knew that she was diagnosed with that deadly coronavirus, but her extreme beauty and her youthfulness compelled them to compromise their moral standards and social principles. Each one of them believed that if he got her, he would cure her. Both are old men, one as old as her father and the other one closer to her grandfather's age. Both are already married, one man with 2 wives, and the other one with 3 women in his ropes. By the way, in Muslim society, when a man marries a woman, she will be considered in the ropes of her husband. Nadia's family agreed to give her in marriage to the one who has a smaller number of wives in his ropes, and who is the younger of the 2 suitors. And that lucky man happened to be none other than the polygamist Hajj Osman Baraka. The loser wept hot tears when he heard that his marriage betrothal was declined and someone else got the lovely rotten apple. Nevertheless, his story does not end there, and we are going to meet him again sometime down the road. He also is a butcher and a rich man like Hajj Osman. Nadia's viral disease proved to be incurable. No matter how much her husband tried to expunge her romantic feelings with beatings and threats, he could not bend her to his will. She is a bold young girl who openly confesses to him that she is in love with her handsome neighbor Sami, and that she is not going to forget him. She also admitted that she had indulged with him many times in passionate kissing and hugging, but she denied having sex with him. Her husband believed her last confession because he knew he was the one who broke the seal of her circumcised pussy and robbed her virginity. Otherwise, he would have slain her in the bed on their first wedding night if he found out she was not a sealed virgin. Since he married her, he rarely slept with his other 2 wives. Whatever Nadia wanted he purchased for her. She is the youngest, the loveliest, and the most beloved one of his 3 wives. Though the butcher has owned her physically, he could not win her love as any good wife is expected to love her husband. Nadia continued to love her boyfriend, Sami. She hates her husband Hajj Osman with passion, and she told him on his face time and again that she abhors him with bitterness. Despite all this, Hajj Osman loves her, and his soul is attached to her soul. He told his relatives and friends that Nadia is his soulmate and Habiba, and he is her Habibi. It does not matter that his love is one-sided as long as she is in his house, and under his pick and call, and can fuck her any time he wants. She is his and him alone, and no man can touch a finger of her body. Therefore he tolerated all her nonsense and rebellion against his authority. When she got demon-possessed by the genie of the white man called Mr. John Jack Russell, the rich butcher Hajj Osman spent a lot of money on her deliverance by way of the Alzar ritual dance. He came to know via his old mother, 3 sisters, and 2 wives that she dared to put on a shirt and trousers, smoked cigarettes, and drank alcohol in his house, and called him the son of a fucking witch and black bitch. She even dared to challenge him in a fight, and claimed she could fuck him with her big penis. But because he loves her so much, he tolerates those improper actions and filthy insults. Before her psychological problem, which was considered a demoniac possession, Nadia spent for years with her husband. Not a single day passed between them without fighting. Hajj Osman beat her, tied her up with ropes, starved her, and tortured her through various cruel means, but he could not change her or win her heart. In his anger, he divorced her 3 times. Every time he divorced her, he quickly regretted his decision and took her back. However, on the 3rd time he could not be able to take her back because it is illegal in the Sharia law for the husband to take back a thrice-divorced wife in succession by the same man. Nevertheless, Hajj Osman refused to allow Nadia to return to her parents' house. He kept her inside his house hanging on his ropes, not knowing what to do to get her back. He stopped sleeping with her because he knew legally he could not have sex with her. He consulted the imam of the biggest mosque in En-Nahid town and requested him to advise him on how to solve his dilemma. The imam told him that if he had sexual intercourse with her, he would be doing the haram thing and committing adultery with her. According to the Sharia, if he is caught, he will be stoned to death because he committed adultery while he is married to other women. If he has no wife and is caught committing adultery, he will be whipped 100 lashes in a public gathering. The Quran requires that corporeal punishment must be witnessed by other Muslims. His former wife Nadia will get also 100 whips on her buttocks. Then the imam secretly advised him that he must find a man to marry his thrice-divorced wife Nadia, and then divorce her on the following day. If that condition is fulfilled, then he can take her back and sleep with her as his lawful wife. Hajj Osman accepted the wise counsel of his religious leader, and began to search for an ideal man who can agree to marry a young beautiful thrice-divorced wife, and then divorce her to legalize her pussy for her former husband. The butcher is careful in his search. He heard about past stories of desperate husbands like him who fell into serious traps when in a hurry. They picked up anonymous men out of the streets and paid them for the deed. Those men refused to divorce their wives and demanded their right to consummate the marriages first. Some even demanded more money to release the wives. The desperate man, Hajj Osman, left no stone unturned before he picked the right men for the job. Guess what? He inadvertently chose the loser, who had shed hot tears when his betrothal for the rotten fruit Nadia was rejected. The Hajj had no knowledge that that man was his competitor and adversary. The man acted in subtlety and came in wolf clothing and offered his help. He made a lip promise that he would marry Nadia and divorce her the very same day. But after the marriage contract was signed in the mosque by him as the groom, Nadia's father as her wali, the imam of the mosque who conducted the marriage, and 2 male witnesses included, he changed his mind. Then and only then did he reveal his true intentions. He confessed that he cried like a baby when her parents rejected him, and gave her to Hajj Osman. Although that rejection happened 4 years ago, still the pain and humiliation did not leave his heart. At that time, he had 3 wives in his ropes, but now 2 of his women had already died, and he remained with 1 wife. Consequently, the former loser said that he wants his new wife Nadia to be handed over to him as soon as possible, otherwise, he will go to the Sharia court and ask the judge to issue the obedience verdict. That verdict is usually passed by the judge of the Sharia court against the disobedient wife, who rebelled against the authority of her husband, and ran to her parents' house, and refused to return. Accordingly, the cops must come and drag the wife by force, and take her to the house of her husband. Haj Osman felt that he had been badly duped by the cunning old geezer. At first, the butcher refused to give in to the threats of the legal husband. He uttered his threats too. He swore by the divorce of his other 2 wives, that he would not allow any mortal being to touch a finger of his former beloved wife Nadia. He announced that he could allow Nadia out of his house over his dead body. Many men in the mosque including the imam tried to find a solution, with every solution and compromise being rejected by the 2 parties in dispute. Each man stood on his ground and refused to move a leg. With no way out, Haj Osman was compelled to agree to a compromise when his opponent took the matter to Sharia court, filing an obedience verdict against his rebellious lawful wife Nadia. The Hajj knows beyond any doubt that the court will not rule in his favor, and any resistance on his part will result in his humiliation and warrant a beating by the cops in full view of his wives and whoever may be present. Added to the insult of having his beloved Nadia removed and taken to his adversary in full view of all neighbors and bystanders. Therefore, Haj Osman agreed to work on a compromise. The compromise is to be worked according to the terms of the new husband. Firstly, the polygamist butcher can redeem his beloved wife Nadia by offering him another wife in her stead. Secondly, Haj Osman must cover the wedding expenses of the said marriage. Thirdly, the new husband will not divorce Nadia unless his sponsored marriage to a new wife is conducted in the mosque by the imam and 2 grown-up Muslim men as witnesses. Fourth, the new husband will not accept a woman who is already married and lost her virginity. He expressly wanted a 10-year-old virgin, who just so happened to be a daughter. And that virgin just so happened to be the Hajj's 10-year-old daughter of his first wife. And so, Haj Osman agreed to give his 10-year-old child in marriage to a 63-year-old man, to redeem his beloved wife, Nadia. Thus, the butcher's daughter Shatsa has been sold in marriage to a man as old as her grandfather against the wishes of her father. The compromise has been worked out in the mosque, adopted and decided upon. The old geezer, his name is Harun, divorced Nadia in front of all. Immediately after the divorce, his marriage contract with the daughter of Haj Osman is conducted by the imam. Haj Osman acted as the wali, legal guardian, of the absent bride with Harun as the groom. The groom paid the customary dowry, the bride's price, in cash to the wali of the bride. When the signatures of the groom, the wali, the imam, and the 2 witnesses have been recorded in the marriage contract, the imam of the mosque has officially declared Harun Rahama and Shatsa Osman a lawfully wedded couple. Everyone was happy and everyone congratulated everyone. At once, a celebration date has been duly scheduled in which the groom must come to the bride's house and consummate his marriage with her. Notwithstanding, when the news reached the ears of the Sharia court judge, a huge legal issue was raised. The judge of the Sharia court, known as Maulana Ibrahim al-Hassan, threw in his red flag and declared the whole matter is sham and unlawful marriage. Maulana is equivalent to a mullah in Afghanistan and Pakistan. The said Maulana supported his objection by first quoting the Quranic verse that says, "And if the husband divorces his wife for the 3rd time, she shall not remain his lawful wife after this absolute divorce, unless she marries another husband, and the second husband divorces her. In that case, there is no harm if they, the first couple, remarry." Sayyid Abul Ala Maududi, The Meaning of the Quran, Volume 1, page 165, Surah Al-Baqarah 2, verse 230. Until this verse, there is no illegal action taken by the disputed parties. The Sharia court judge's objection is based on an authentic hadith of the Prophet Muhammad, and a true practical similar case that happened during the lifetime of the Prophet. The judge of the Sharia court said that even if Hajj Harun agreed to divorce Nadia still, she cannot go back to her husband Hajj Osman. He quoted a hadith of the Prophet Muhammad, which stated that a second husband should taste the honey or sweetness of his bride, and she must taste his honey, which means they must have sexual intercourse. In his book, Reason for the Revelation, page number 46, the Suyuti stated that a woman came to the Prophet Muhammad and told him, Abdulrahman, the succeeding husband known in Arabic as the Muhalal whom she wed after she was divorced, has divorced me without having any sexual intercourse with me. May I go back to my ex-husband? The Prophet Muhammad said to her, No, that is not permissible until Abdulrahman has sex with you first, then you may go back to Rafa. In our case, Harun Rama is Abdulrahman and Hajj Osman is the former husband Rafa. Accordingly, based on the decision of the infallible Prophet of Islam, Muhammad ibn Kilab, that had been stated in this hadith, Harun's divorce of Nadia was void pending the formality of tasting each other's sweetness or honey. In other words, unless Harun fucked Nadia, he cannot divorce her. Marriage in Islam is called nikah, which means sexual intercourse. So, without sex, there is no marriage, and hence in this case divorce is out of the question. This case is narrated in more detail in another hadith of the Prophet Muhammad. Yahya related to me from Malik from al-Maswar ibn Rifa al-Quradi from al-Zubair ibn Abdulrahman ibn al-Zubair that Rifa ibn Simul divorced his wife, Tamima bint Wahab, in the time of the Messenger of Allah, may Allah bless him and grant him peace, 3 times. Then she married Abdulrahman ibn al-Zubair, and he turned from her, and could not consummate the marriage, and so he parted from her. Her former husband Rifa wanted to marry her again, and it was mentioned to the Messenger of Allah, may Allah bless him and grant him peace, and he forbade him to marry her. He said, She is not halal, lawful, for you until she has tasted the sweetness of intercourse. Muwatta Malik, Book 28, Hadith number 28. The proclamation of the Sharia court judge rendered the divorce of Harun illegal, and so the old geezer ended up being the great winner by having 2 wives, Nadia and Shatsa, with the butcher being the abject loser. Even so, Hajj Osman refused to hand over his beloved Nadia to his adversary. Once again, after a long discussion and counseling at the mosque, the 2 disputed parties agreed to work on another compromise. According to this new compromise, Hajj Osman must make another great sacrifice. This new sacrifice will effectively jeopardize his honor, fill his mouth with dust and cover his head with ashes, but he has no choice. The Hajj against his wish agreed to the old geezer entering his house and having sexual intercourse with his beloved wife Nadia, but that can be a one-time deal. Therefore, a date is scheduled inside the mosque for the night on which Harun Rama can come and legalize the pussy of the wife in question. Everyone in the entire town came to know that on such and such a day the old man, Harun Rama, is coming to Hajj Osman's house to fuck his lovely former wife number 3, Nadia, and the butcher can do nothing to him. The Indian wife Samira never doubted any story that her Sudanese girlfriend Salwa had told her before except the story of the third wife. In complete astonishment after hearing the details of the story, she said emphatically that such a thing should never happen in real life to any woman. She refused to believe that any man in the entire world can agree to another man coming to his home to have sex with his wife to legalize her vagina for him. For the American couple, Samir and Samira, such absurdity does not warrant any name. It is more than adultery, fornication, sodomy, lesbianism, masturbation, polygamy, polyandry, rape, and pedophilia. Even necrophilia, bestiality, or porn with beast sex movies and animal sex clips is not as outrageous as this evil practice of another man to legalize the thrice-divorced wife's pussy. Human beings have not yet reached that low level of sexual degradation to come up with a proper term to describe that action of the muhalal. Sexual legalizing of the thrice-divorced wife's vagina does not do justice to that level of sheer evil. Chapter 29. The Child Marriage.
Naturally, the American couple Samir and Samira want to know if at all The old man Haj Rama had crept inside the house of the notorious polygamist and dangerous butcher at night and raped his beloved and favorite ex-wife Nadia and not slain in an honor killing. Sulwa answered in the affirmative, and the reply hit Samira like a thunderbolt and killed all her emotions and feelings on the spot and turned her into a statue without a soul. When she overcame the horror, she simply responded with a terse, "I do not want to hear any more stories about those barbarians." For Samira, it has signaled the end of her desire to learn more about the abuse of women in Islam. She concluded that there could be no greater evil to uncover than what she had learned that day. Samir does not agree with Samira's decision, however, agreeing wholeheartedly that there will probably be no greater abuse on Muslim women they add to what they have already learned. He also agreed with her that it was time for them to quit their research and pack up their belongings, leave the dark and backward Muslim society of Sudan, and return to the light of reason and morality in their country, the land of the free and home of the brave. But, in the interests of closure and empathy, the American husband begged his Indian wife to wait until they could determine the fate of the child, Shatsa. Is she going to be handed over to that wicked old geezer for her to be abused and raped by him too? Disgruntled and not convinced, Samira swallowed up her wrath and returned to her Sudanese girlfriend, followed by her Eritrean female interpreter Mona, and asked Sulwa to continue her narration of the unfortunate women slaves who are under the domain of the devil incarnate, the butcher Haj Osman. Sulwa resumed by describing the events around wife number 3 Nadia, the night the old man came to taste the sweetness of her delicate body and enjoy the honey of her pussy. Nadia herself had confided her bitter experience with Sulwa. She said she had never felt so much humiliated and degraded in all her life than when that dirty 63-year-old man had sex with her. His body smelt like a decomposed body of a dead animal. His mouth produced a nasty odor of snuff and bad breath. It seemed that he had never once brushed his yellow-stained teeth. He fell on her body as an animal fell on the body of a resisting female. As soon as he attacked her body, she began to resist and push him away. He was such a strong old man that she could not kick him off. He is a butcher and knows how to handle a resisting strong bull or camel and kill it and flay out its skin and sell its flesh. So, raping a woman for him is as easy as having sex with a small lamb or goat. Nadia regretted that she agreed to be locked in a room with such a beast man. She did everything she could to stop him from raping her. She scratched his face with her fingernails. She hit his head with her fists and kicked his body with her legs. She bit his cheeks and shoulders with her sharp teeth. She screamed as loud as she could, but no one came to rescue her. Before he ejaculated and emptied his filthiness inside her pussy and legalized it for her ex-husband, Nadia lost consciousness. When she opened her eyes again after many hours, she found herself in a hospital. After that horrifying night rape experience, Nadia fell extremely sick until everybody thought that she was going to die at any moment. It took a long time for her body to overcome that brutal rape. As soon as she came out of the hospital, Nadia was confronted with another fundamental problem. Wife number 1 Khadija accused her of being the cause behind the marriage of her 10-year-old daughter Shatsa to her ex-husband, the 63-year-old man, Haj Harun. It is no surprise that the two wives engaged in constant verbal and physical fights, day in and day out, night and day. According to Sulwa and Sakina, wife number 1 took the fight to a nastier level. She decided to kill Nadia, albeit in a very drawn-out, painful way. She schemed to kill her without directly involving herself in her murder. Naturally, she approached another wicked Faki, a witch doctor, and paid him to work again the worst black magic on her rival, Nadia. Wife number 2, Hafsa, joined her in her evil scheme and even made her contribution to the payment. And Nadia became demon-possessed again by a new foreign genie from Ethiopia known as Mr. Abraha al-Habashi, and she almost died in the process.
According to Sulwa, Nadia was lucky enough to have escaped the grip of the new black magic before it invariably killed her. Her husband Haj Osman loves her so much, which explains why he took her to a faqih, and through him she got cured. This time, the butcher refused to treat his possessed wife through the Alzar dance. He did not want his beloved wife to get drunk with alcohol again in his house and call him the son of a bitch. Sulwa wanted to indulge herself in the details of the fights that took place after the second deliverance of the twice demon-possessed woman, and what was ongoing between those bitter rival wives. Samira, on the other hand, steered the conversation back to the developments of the so-called halal marriage of the little 10-year-old girl Shatsa and the 63-year-old man Haj Harun. Sulwa said that at first, Haj Osman said he was not going to allow Haj Harun to take his daughter, Shatsa. He argued that the reason behind that marriage was to redeem his beloved wife Nadia, but after Haj Harun slept with his third wife, there was no need for such a marital union. Haj Osman felt that he failed to protect his wife's honor. She was raped inside his own house, and with his full knowledge, and he could not do anything to prevent it. He believes that his religious leaders who were supposed to protect his honor had betrayed him, and forced him to agree to something that no man in the entire world would agree to allow to happen to his wife. Haj Osman, like every Muslim in the world, failed to see mistakes with his religious sacred texts, the Quran and Hadiths, and the alleged prophet of God who legalized such nonsense. Muslims always direct their criticisms and blame their religious leaders and scholars who interpreted those sacred texts. Anyway, when blind people want to remain blind to obvious facts, what can we do to help them? Likewise, Haj Osman, Haj Harun, the victimized wife Nadia, the imam of the mosque, and all others involved in this evil scheme are as blind to the truth as dumb idiots and blind bats. When the butcher refused to allow Haj Harun to take his lawful wife Shatsa, the latter once again took the matter to the Sharia court and requested the judge to issue yet another obedience verdict. But before the court looked into the matter, the news of the lawsuit reached the ears of Haj Osman. Before he did anything, the butcher once again consulted the imam of the biggest mosque and humbly sought his wise counsel. The imam knows beforehand what the outcome will be and frankly tells Haj Osman what is going to happen to him when the policemen come by to enforce the order of the Sharia court. Instead of being publicly humiliated by the policeman in the presence of his 3 wives, 21 children, many neighbors, and other curious bystanders, Haj Osman chose the lesser evil once again. He changed his mind and sent a word to his new son-in-law, inviting him to come and take his daughter out of his house in honor. That means he must come and celebrate the wedding ceremony and consummate the marriage contract in Haj Osman's residence. Haj Harun gladly welcomed the generous offer of his new father-in-law and scheduled a date on which he can come as a groom to sleep with his lovely small child bride, who is going to be to him his wife number 4. By then his wife number 1 perished and his wife number 2 died shortly after her. Both women died in their old ages and only wife number 3, who is 55, is still alive and hanging on his ropes.
This will take us back to the time when the American couple Samira and Samir heard the disturbing news that a 10-year-old girl was going to marry a 63-year-old man. With Sulwa's help, they could be able to understand how those 2 men have pieced together the evil plot of the so-called halal child marriage. Haj Osman and Haj Harun have worked out the selfish schemes that made 2 innocent girls fall victim to them, Nadia and Shatsa, and the religious system has justified and condoned the abuse of those 2 women. The American couple is glumly aware that they are powerless to intervene. At this point, they can only stand back, cross their fingers, and hope that God will work a miracle and save the life of an innocent child from the claws of the old vulture. On the wedding night, the so-called groom Haj Harun performed his last prayer of the day at 11:30 p.m. He kept the news about his new marriage hidden from his old wife, sons, daughters, and grandchildren. He decided to declare the matter after his first night with his new bride. He determined to threaten his wife with a bullet of divorce if she raised any objection against his new child bride Shatsa bint Haj Osman. He even determined to disown any of his progeny if they objected to his marriage in his old age. He put on his old clothes, which meant the last time he wore them was 10 years ago when he returned from his visit to the forbidden house of Allah, the Black Kaaba in Mecca City. He stood before the mirror and looked at his image on the other side. Before he put on his big turban over his bald square head, he looked like a black pig. When he placed it on his head, he resembled an ugly gorilla. He thanked Allah for giving him a license to marry a small girl in his old age. What a funny thing, said the old geezer to himself, if instead, Allah allows an old woman of his age to marry a child boy of Shatsa's age. The old man praised Allah loudly for his unfathomed wisdom and generous offer to his favorite creature, the male. Haj Harun Rahama Alajabo, this is his full name which no one knew except him and his family, guessed that by this time Haj Osman had already left his house. He knows no father should be present at his daughter's first wedding night in his own house. It is a custom and everyone follows it. When Harun left his house that night, not a single being was in the streets. Even the stray dogs are asleep in their holes. He carried his big stick and walked slowly towards where he planned to spend his honeymoon with his 10-year-old child bride. It took the old geezer an hour to creep from his house to his father-in-law Haj Osman's home. Gently and carefully, he knocked on the door with his big stick. Wife number 1, Khadija, his new mother-in-law, has opened the door for him. She welcomed him with a sad face. She is unhappy with the marriage, but she has been forced to accept Allah's fate for her little daughter. She informed him that her husband had left the house and spent the night with distant relatives. Then the devil incarnate, called the groom, enters the house's compound and is directed by the mother to the hut where her small daughter Shatsa is sleeping. She gave him the key and returned to her hut. As soon as the mother disappeared into her hut, Haj Harun unlocked the door and entered the hut of his new child bride. When the small girl saw the old man, she felt as if a black ghost had come to attack her in her sleep and possess her soul. She began to cry loudly and call her mother for help, but no one came to rescue her from her rapist. In the meantime, the American couple has commendable tolerance to all manner of evils against women, but not this kind of evil done to a child of 10 years old. That Black Friday night, they decided to play the roles of cowardly people, follow Sakina's advice, and cover their ears with their pillows. They know that they cannot possibly hear the voice of a child crying for help in the middle of the night, and hence, they do nothing about it. How can their consciences tolerate the crying of a 10-year-old girl while an old man is raping her? Therefore, Samir and Samira covered their ears with their big pillows and fell into an uneasy sleep.
Nevertheless, exceedingly early on Saturday morning, they are awakened by the wailing and yelling of many women. As if more than 30 women broke into their hut and began to shout in unison. Samira, the first one to respond, sprang out of bed and ran out of the hut as if pursued by a bush fire. Samir is close behind following her tail. When the couple approached the compound, it became clear to them that the shouting was coming from the house of the large family of the polygamist butcher. Millions of horrifying thoughts clouded their disturbed minds. Samira ran to the women's section without waiting for her female interpreter to accompany her. She did not find the two widows in their hut. She guessed that they had already run into their neighbor's house. She followed suit. Samira found even more women in number present than on the day of the Alzar ritual dance. Even small boys and children are there. The sight of women screaming on their knees greeted her. Some of them are having their hair uncovered and ashes covering their heads. Some are falling on the ground and rolling around and around like lunatic women in epileptic fits. Samira jumped to a quick conclusion that the old geezer most probably had died. She thought that, due to his advanced age, he expired on his first wedding night from the exertion. For the first time in her life, she felt happy over a death. Wisely she feigned sadness, sat on the ground, and continued to view the bewailing women. She concluded that the loving and just God had answered their prayers by slaying the wicked old man and saving the innocent child from being raped by him. Her secret happiness soon changed to rushing emotions of anger. She felt like standing amid that crowd of crying women and loudly rebuking those stupid females for lamenting the death of a wicked old man. A moment before putting her thoughts into action, she felt a hand touch her back. She looked up into the face of her Sudanese girlfriend standing over her with eyes full of tears. Sulwa tried to talk, but her voice failed her. She already has lost her voice due to the many hours of crying. Samira instinctively understood that her girlfriend Sulwa would never cry that much for a wicked old man. She stood up immediately and ran out of that house of horror where an innocent child was abused and raped to death. Therefore, she did not wait for anyone to tell her what had happened to the poor child who was called a lawful wife of the evil old geezer. For 3 days, after that day, the Indian wife did not socialize with anyone except her American husband. Samira rarely ate any food or drank any water. She remained wrapped in her bed crying hot tears of grief. It is doubtless that the old man had raped the little underage girl to death, but she did not want to hear the description of that brutal rape. She did not need anyone to tell her about it because she had already gone through it when she was a child of 7. She did not want to relive that painful experience. Meanwhile, the American husband did everything he could to bring his beloved Indian wife out of her sorrow and depression. He prayed with her, read the Bible for her, and sang her favorite hymns. He also spent hours counseling her. He taught her what the Bible said about sin, evil, and Satan. He tried to make her understand and accept the fact that evil is a constant in our cursed world. He told her that people commit those hideous crimes because they are unrepentant sinners. They are not born-again Christian believers. Their false religion gives them a license to commit crimes against their female counterparts. Their religious teachings also made them call evil good and good evil. Moreover, there are evil spirits that lead them to commit hideous crimes against their fellow human beings. After 3 days, Samira returned to her girlfriend Sulwa and apologized for deserting them at a time when they needed her the most. Sulwa accepted the apology of her girlfriend and assured her that she had done nothing wrong. She said to her any foreign woman in her place might do the same thing or might flee back to her country. Then Sulwa told Samira briefly in a few sentences how the child bride had died. The old man informed the mother that her daughter was profusely bleeding through her private parts. When the mother came in, she found her daughter's clothes were covered with blood. The blood was everywhere on the bed. The child was crying and shaking like a reed. The mother tried many ways to stop the bleeding, but she could not. She rushed to wake Sakina and Sulwa and sought their help. Sakina suggested that they should take the child bride to the hospital. After that wise advice, Khadija, Sakina, Sulwa, and the groom hurried the child to the hospital. The child bride lapsed into a coma before they brought her to the hospital. When they reached the hospital, not a single doctor was to be found. The available staff of the nurses tried to stop the bleeding, but they could not. By then the child's private parts were bleeding copiously. Her face became pale and her body cold. She remained in her coma throughout the night. They did not know that she died until a doctor came early in the morning and declared her dead and gone. Sulwa narrated those sad details amidst sobs. When she finished, the two girlfriends held each other and cried for a long time. For the first time, Samira told Sulwa about her childhood abuse. She related how she went through the same bitter rape experience when she was a child of 7 years. That evil action lasted for quite a long time. For 10 years, she remained imprisoned in the house of terror owned by a sexually perverted wicked Saudi old man. Sulwa listened to the horrifying details with tears falling all over her face and body. She wept for Samira more than she wept for the late Shatsa. She understood that Shatsa had suffered for a few hours and passed away, but Samira was made to suffer for 10 years, and the memories of those years are still tormenting her.